what's really interesting about like pre-Christian European pagan cultures is like, okay, you mentioned the no armor, right? But I think that might be like a concept that was parallel to Viking berserkers, right? And like there was a lot of pre-Christian pagan religions where they genuinely wanted to die in battle. Like that was like their dream.
See,
like,
here's
to
the
die
thing.
in battle.
Here's the thing about the damn Viking berserkers, though, because here's the problem with ancient Nordic cultures is the fact that a lot of information we have on them is based upon what they wrote down. There are a number of historians. Now, again, this is debated, so this is not fact or not proven fact. I've heard a lot of historians talking about how they didn't see any real world precedent for actual berserkers. Now, there is evidence that they may have had a special class of warrior that did imbibe certain psychedelic mushrooms before battle, but to suggest that they went out there without any sort of protection at all, there's just no basis for fact. Now, in a Norse saga, they mention it all the time, but of course you're going to do that, especially if you win. Nobody's talking about, Ragnar went out there with no armor and got skewered by like 60 guys. It was fucking epic, you know.
No, but that concept though, right? And like, you know what? Like I'm gonna sound like I'm just parroting off the show Vikings, but really no, they genuinely wanted to die in battle, right? And the mushrooms was a very big part of the culture there. Mm-hmm. Even like, I don't know, have you ever heard Joe Rogan talk about Santa Claus?
Yeah.
And the myth behind Santa Claus, right? Like Santa was essentially a shaman, right? It was a shaman of a village who would collect these mushrooms throughout the year, and during the high holy days of the solstice, would go around and distribute the mushrooms to the people in the village, right? And he would often, and this was also very like common in like certain Slavic cultures, like in the Siberian steppes and that kind of thing, where the snow would pile so high it would cover the door, so he'd have to go in through the chimney. Right, and that's where like the whole legend of Santa came from. And then the particular strain of mushrooms, I don't remember the name, but it's the red one, the classic red one with the white spots. But that was like, that was a very common part of their culture. Why am I getting notifications still? That was a common part of their culture, and then they would eat them like regularly as part of shamanistic rituals, or like, you know, the high holy days, or whatever it was. And like even that prevalence of like eating mushrooms and going to battle, that was a thing in other parts of Europe too. Like in Southern Europe, in Portugal, right, we were a tribe known as the Lusitanians. And the Lusitanians were prized by the Roman legions as like the most feared warriors because they also didn't wear armor. And they chose not to wear armor because then they could ride horse. They could ride horses, because the Lusitano, the breed of horse called a Lusitano, it's not like a very big horse, but it's very fast. Right, so they purposely did not wear armor so they could be quick, and they would take mushrooms as well and just go into battle like that. And also, side note, the Lusitanians, the way that they would divine the future was they would like cut somebody's abdomen open, and then the way that their guts spilled out, they would tell the future from that.
I mean, that'll tell you everything you need to know. You did touch on something though, and I want it's because I'm sure you understand this too, being a history nerd, because I can tell right away that you are also. You have to be very, very skeptical of a culture that, quote unquote, wishes death. Because my favorite example of this is probably the samurai.
Samurai?
Yeah, because when you just first start learning about them, you're like, oh yes, you know, they didn't fear death. Da da da. Then you really start getting into it, and you realize the samurai rarely actually did any of the fighting.
Well, yeah, the samurai were nobility.
They were
nobility. They didn't have to fight. They would send people to fight for them.
They would send the peasants to fight. Yeah, so it's real easy to sit there and claim, you know, like there's only shame in defeat, and if you lose, you should kill yourself. It's like, well, yeah, that's real nice when you don't actually have to fucking fight. You know, when your men are retreating and you can say, you should all commit suicide. Not me though, because I have to lead. Be wary. Be very wary of that guy. Well, it's the same for, I'm not going to say all, but modern day jihadists. It's like, oh yeah, you can talk a big game, but where's your bomb vest?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.